actions that the state took. So it wasn't just a first step or, now we're going to study some more and wait another 10 or 15 years, but it's actually usable data. And I understand if you have to go through a peer review process and whatever you need to do to kind of meet your standards, but just the development of this project, I have to say, I'm working with Fraser that and being a part of a group of people who worked with Fraser, that it really was vetted through many tribes, and he came to EPA Region 9 RTOC, which is a Regional Tribal Operations Committee meetings, spoke with many tribes there, did presentations at our California Issues Work Group, met with tribes individually. We had lots of email chains, and there was quite a huge effort that he and his group made to reach out to tribes. And even though only members from only 40 tribes responded, it really was maybe a time and a funding thing, and given more time and funding, it probably would have gone further. So it is something that that we have full support of and confidence in the information. I would like to talk a little bit about Big Valley Band of Poma Indians. As I mentioned, it's one of the Clear Lake tribes, which is the the largest natural freshwater lake in California. And Big Valley is a water tribe. I mean, it's important for that water to be clean. It's important for there to be abundant fish and natural resources there. And if you all have been reading the news and seeing the cyanobacteria bloom information and the cyanotoxin issues and just overall kind of degradation of Clear Lake, you can see why whatever standards and regulatory actions that have been taken thus far are not enough to have a fishable, swimmable lake. That and matter of fact, even though we have 2 TMDLs there, one for mercury and one for nutrients, we probably need several more. And the only reason why we don't is because there's not enough monitoring on Clear Lake to actually determine that there's that there are those other impacts. But in terms of this study and why it's such an important one for the State Water Resources Control Board to consider is because it really does touch all areas of some tribes' existence, and fish and being able to consume them and use them at the traditional rates impacts not only food but ceremony and also economics. As Fraser mentioned, there's a lot of trade, and even in the last several decades, even on Clear Lake, there was a catching of fish and catfish and selling them to people in the Bay Area. So that's something that not a lot of tribes have necessarily done anything about in terms of loss of economic functioning, but because of the mercury issues in the fish in Clear Lake and other pollutants there's been a loss of economic functioning of the tribes. We have submitted traditional rates before to the Central Valley Regional Quality Board and also to the county, and showing a rate of 2 pounds of fish a day, and along with other aquatic organisms, and this information was never used. It was just considered kind of hearsay, and that was our other understanding of why US EPA funded this, was so that the State Water Resources Control Board could feel comfortable with I guess real information, because it was vetted through a scientific study. But as Fraser said, the tribes have been saying this for a long time, and we hope that it is used for the regulatory framework that it needs. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Those are some thought-provoking comments, and Dr. Schilling, I was wondering, you don't have to have the answer to the question, but it's a question that arises, is we hear a lot about the economic benefits of using water in different ways in California. Here we just heard about an economic benefit to a large population of people with respect to having viable fish populations that provide food. Are you familiar with any economic studies of the value of these fisheries, whether it's salmon, not just commercial salmon coming from the ocean? That's $2 billion and change now. It used to be more. this triggers some questions in my mind in terms of how we could monetize this value of water in California.
Yeah, there have been studies, a lot of them in the Northwest, for salmon benefits economically, and both the direct benefit from the fish itself and then the indirect benefit of all the activities that are associated with that. And a lot of focus has been on commercial, but a lot of the importance economically is even if it's a small number, like $1 million, if it's $1 million for 100 people in a tribe, that's a big deal. $1 million in California, maybe not so. So it depends what you compare it to as to whether or not the economic benefits of having intact fish, how that compares with intact agriculture. You may lose the equation, but that may not be the question. So there's certainly plenty of studies that would allow you to explore that here. You could use the equivalent value of a fish and the indirect values of a fish fairly readily. I would just say that you would really want to make sure you understood the scale at which you're asking the question. Important for the tribe or important for the state?
Great. Sorry, next speaker. Arinia Quiticquit? Did I say it right? Sorry. From the Scotts Valley Band. Yeah. I know you, but I never actually said your name, so I wasn't sure.
Pardon? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank Fraser for doing this study. I think it was very, very important to do for the tribes. And then also that he included the tribes in helping design the survey to make it, Indian friendly. And so that was kind of you to do that. I also wanted to give support to Big Valley, and that I hope that you take in consideration other points. And I know Scotts Valley is in support of that. I just have a short comment. And basically, I would like to see the board provide additional funding like you did for this project that addresses water quality, water monitoring, and in-stream flows. Something we need to really do in Clear Lake. I'm sure they need it in other places as well in California. I'm thinking this funding will, assist the tribes in working toward eating more healthy fish. That really is important to their diet. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
Before you move on, a quick question for staff. What was the source of the funding that we provided for this study? Was it part of the TMDL?
Or the 205J? It's like a,
Okay, thank you.
Oh, 205J, of course. Wait, I don't know what 205J. What's
That's
205J?
planning, right? Planning?
That's planning money. Sorry, I know I should know all my numbers. I used to
Standards?
just sign checks.
USCPA for water, for planning and standards. Yeah.
Okay.
And approximately how much of those 205J funding do we get from EPA each year? Or does it, change each year?
Yeah, it does change every year. I think it to be 1% of your of our capitalization grant. It's tied to the capitalization grant, and actually, not that it makes any difference, but it's under Section 604B now. We just still call it 205J.
And to answer your question, Tam, directly, we've been recently, because of, again, the State Revolving Fund grant, it's been running about $1 million a year for the 205J grant. About 60% of that goes to fund staff. So we have...
And then 40% to do studies and
Correct.
the like that are essential. Okay, so we have some flex on
Yes.
things. That's good. One of the things I would like to do, I have a bunch of follow-up notes that we can talk about that go around, but I'd love to do a meeting. We've met with Region 9's tribal program. I'd like to sit down and meet with them. I'd also like to hear more about what Region 10 is doing, because on some things, Region 9 was ahead of Region 10 on a number of things, despite that difference that you talked about, but on this, it sounds like there's a lot we can learn from Region 10, so I just assume we get a sense of what the cutting edge is on all of this stuff, and also where the funding sources are to do as much of the work as possible, as quickly as possible. Next speaker is Paula Britton, the Environmental Director for the HABA Madeley. I don't even know how to say it. It's, yeah, Pomo of Upper Lake. Paula, it's Paula's turn.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Board and Chair Felicia. I want to thank
like that.
Fraser for everything that he has done with the interviewing process. It was painful at times. We had a lot of controversy about how things should be gathered, and you're not doing this right, Fraser. So he was very incredibly patient with all of us, and I really appreciate that, and also being included in the whole design of this project. I wanted to talk today a little bit, first I gotta say ditto to what my colleagues have said on water quality, flow, and temperature. Temperature is a huge issue. I was out setting hobos with a friend of mine on the Middle Eel on July 19th. The temperature of the pools there was 86 degrees. All those fingerlings were frying. We went out there not too long ago. They're all dead. And as we all know, there's a drought going on. So this is happening everywhere. I talked to a lot of people in Hoopa, Karuk, Yurok. I'm involved in some issues up there. I have a daughter that's Hoopa. So I'm familiar with gathering fish. We go with friends to their traditional fishing places. They fish for, well, he fishes for everybody that can't fish for themselves. That's part of the tradition of how you share this. I'm a Lakota. I'm married into a California Indian tribal, well, family. My kids are half and half. We eat an incredible amount of protein, which is what I want to get to. My family is a subsistence family, or I was raised on subsistence living, from Washington to Arizona to Utah as we moved around, and then to my home reservation. Everywhere Indians go, they trade. I mean, I went home to South Dakota from here, they sent me back with 3 salmon. I brought back jerky. I'm diabetic, which just happened not too long ago. I can't eat what everybody else eats. Breakfasts for me are jerky, salmon, deer, buffalo, or beef if I don't have any other choice. And my husband makes this for me all the time because of all the additives. So that's coffee, the brown food group. Coffee and jerky every morning.
That's right. I knew there was a reason I liked you.
Well, let me tell you about the meat eaters line in Palmistry sometime. Seriously, there's a line there. And, you know, it's part of my diet. I have to have it. If I don't, I get sick. I was frantically looking downstairs for something to eat. Eggs don't quite cut it. Fish, salmon, if it's a fatty fish for me, I can handle that. One of the big benefits of subsistence living is you're healthier. We have a biological imperative as Indian people to eat these types of food. Diabetes is huge everywhere, but worse among the Indian populations. And we have a huge amount of governmental money going into diabetes programs. And we have a huge amount of people that are overweight, including youngsters. And a lot of that is disconnect with nature. We're not hunting for our own foods. We're not gathering our own foods. As a family, we try to do that more often than not. Because for one thing, it's healthier. I can't afford to buy organics. I really don't make that kind of money, and I have a huge family. There are like 6, 7 kids with my grandchild. Most of them are out of the house, but they kind of fluctuate in and out. And of course, we feed everybody. It's just much healthier for us to eat this way. The second thing is, it's your ecosystem. It's better for all of you too. It breaks my heart when I go to places like Big Sandy or up there, and I look at the San Joaquin and there's no water running. And I see agricultural ditches full of water. And I see Indian people without water to drink that are forced into dealing with uranium-contaminated water and groundwater. I look at that and I think, wait now. There is a responsibility on the part of everyone, I think, under public trust doctrine and other things, to look out for those people. And when you are looking out for certain segments of society that don't put any value on our ecosystems, I'm pretty simple. I'm an Indian person. That's just wrong. And when you don't put that emphasis on temperatures, we can't eat fish that are mushy. At least we don't like to. If you don't have those cool temperatures, those fish don't survive. And it ruins the meat. It ruins the flavor. It ruins everything. So there's a number of things going on here. And being new to California, well, not that new, but new to water law, water everything within about the last 5 years, This is the most manipulated state I've ever seen in terms of how they manage their water. And very little of it has to do with any type of natural system or flow. It's very discouraging. I've learned a lot here, and I have to thank, well, DWR for a lot of my knowledge, people at Davis, State Water Quality Control Board. And I would not like to be faced with the jobs that you have. But I'm hoping that you really take these things into consideration, because temperature is a huge deal, flow is a huge deal. And just the protection of what we have here in Northern California is huge. Thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least, Andrea Ventura, back for return engagement today. Yeah. Clean Water Action. No, thank you for being with us so long today.
Well, I want to thank Dr. Schilling and as well as the tribes who participated in this study. As a representative of an environmental organization with about 55,000 members in the state, I can tell you that we read these studies and we do incorporate what we learn from them into the policies we advocate for. So it doesn't go into a vacuum that way, and it influences us. So we appreciate the knowledge that we've gotten to this. As you contemplate how this study can and should influence water policy, I would ask you to consider a few things. I don't have to tell you that one of the things, some of you have heard me say this before, you know, one of the things we're very concerned with is that when we do water cleanup plans, whether they're TMDLs or other ways of addressing contamination, we often feel that the cleanup goals that we're setting are nowhere near adequate, either for environmental purposes, but particularly to protect human beings when we're dealing with bioaccumulative contaminants. The 1 meal a week kind of average cleanup goal and fish tissue target doesn't cut it. And I think this study really points the way to the fact that we've been yelling about this for, you know, the last 10, 15 years, and there, you know, here's more evidence that that's important. This is a great precedent, this study. We need more of this, not only to fill in further information about other tribes in the state, but also because tribes are not the only subsistence fishers in the state. And I don't want to take away from their very unique needs today. But I, living in the Bay Area, work largely with Asian communities, African American communities, Russian communities that consume very high levels of fish, either out of cultural tradition or out of economic need. And we need to be protecting these people. Also, to get to the contaminant issue, I think one of the other things that this study should be looked at is when we're dealing with other contaminants. We talk a lot about mercury, but the truth of the matter is that not everyone eats the same kind of fish. Also, different fish have different problems. Salmon may not be the highest mercury problem, but PCBs, yes. And our fish advisories and consumption advisories do not consider that, nor do they consider the heritage of people or the economic needs. Just a couple more things. When I read the report, I had a few aha moments that really were important to me and I think are essential to protect tribal members as well as other populations. And one of those was the idea that tribal fishing should be assumed to be in almost any California watershed and waterway, and that what they're eating is going to vary from community to community. So looking at a single sentinel fish and trying to come up with a one-size-fits-all average of what's going on out there is not reality. One of the things that we have advocated for is that when we're doing the research that can take a decade sometimes for a TMDL or a cleanup plan, we shouldn't just be looking at the watershed and how the contaminant works. We need to understand exactly what's going on in that watershed. Who is fishing? How much are they eating? And what are they eating?
Well, and how much somebody else is eating who may not live there, but relies on that fish.
Exactly. Which is a very interesting point, as you have pointed out. So, you know, we need to incorporate that kind of research, and we have not. That has not been part of the thinking in the development of our plans. I'll leave it at that because I'm running out of time, I know. But, you know, what we're talking about here is, frankly, will drive, if we take this seriously, this study, will drive more stringent cleanup plans. That's complicated, that's challenging, it's something that is a little scary, but it needs to be done. And we hope that this study will influence us and move us in that direction as a state.
Thank you.
Yeah, one thing there, I'm not clear, I'm not aware of data that shown PCBs are elevated in salmon. That she just said, I've never seen any data that supports that statement. Do you have? Yeah, but they collect in places where there's higher residence time. Residence time plays a role in that.
I have a bunch of other questions. I know people are tired and want to move on, but this is not the only conversation on this, and I'm going to want to follow up on a number of things, both how do we incorporate traditional ecological knowledge into our existing standard setting. This helps, but I agree with the point that we shouldn't have to do this in order to be able to make observations and actions based on reality. So we need to figure that out, and I would like to do some follow-up with EPA Region 9 and Region 10. Love to set up a time for a briefing on this longer than the time we had here today with folks from the regions. I don't know if you want to do that through MCC or, since that's a regularly scheduled thing. I know we'll be doing the beneficial use designation work sometime this fall, right, or early winter, and we'll be talking about this issue then also, as well as what the implications are. And then just if we can start a broader, I'd just like to, now that we're through with session and have a little bit of volition on timing, I'd just like to schedule a chunk of time with some of you to just brainstorm on this with Geeta as well, and think about all the implications and how we can do this kind of thinking and recognition more assertively. And I would like someone, whoever, what group, can come give me a briefing on Clear Lake, and presumably Steve should be a part of it as well. Because I don't know as much about Clear Lake in general as I ought to. I'm overdue on that. Is that right?
Yeah, you know, I want to support Chair Marcus in this in terms of, you know,
Chair Felicia.
Chair Felicia
I like that much.
had the right.
It was good today.
You're touching on it. You didn't say the word, but it's sustainability is tied with traditional ecological knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and our vision as the State Water Board is centered on the topic of sustainability of water resources. And so, you know, we can't not embrace traditional ecological knowledge as a guiding light in how California can grapple with the challenge of sustainable water resources. It goes hand in hand. And so I just want to support this dialogue, you know, what we can learn from traditional ecological knowledge moving forward in the 21st century.
And that from the engineering wing.
Well,
exciting, really.
let me then play the bad engineer. Though I definitely agree with both my colleagues in terms of supporting the dialogue and exploring this issue further. I, for one, would also like to have a discussion with staff at some point, especially legal staff, in terms of our authority, flexibility, as well as specific requirements in terms of the data that needs to be in the record as we worked on developing policies and standards and whatnot. Let's be real here. I'm always a practical, person at heart, and that is as we've heard today on the previous items on our agenda. There's always a lot of controversy and differences of opinions and conflict over some of the decisions that are made by both the Regional Water Board and then by us. I think we've held very firmly to the tenet that the decisions we made are based on very sound science, based on data that is collected, that is peer-reviewed, and that's part of the foundation for the decisions we make, which are very often litigated in court and which are very often, I would hope, supported through various decisions because of the scientific foundation for those decisions that are made. That's not to say that it must always remain that way. I certainly do support the discussions today and support going forward in finding a potential solution, but I would caution that we need to do so being very mindful of not just the board's legal obligations, and I can't believe I'm saying this as an engineer, but also of our responsibility to reach balanced decisions after considering a lot of different factors. Obviously cultural needs, but also the needs of various competing water users, economic needs, as well as, you know, costs associated. And for me as an engineer, the practicality of being able to achieve and accomplish a certain objective and not just set a goal that is not reachable economically or technically from, you know, from a policy as well as an implementation basis. So while I certainly do support the chair's and Member Moore's comment, I guess I would just insert a note of practicality from the other engineer on the board in terms of how we proceed on this matter.
Right. I'm happy to also, there's an awful lot of work being done. That conference I was at was all about traditional ecological knowledge, and many countries are actually science. It's how you define science and how you deal with science. Just because it's traditional to one culture doesn't mean traditional ecological knowledge is in many cases just as valid or more valid, and science is recognizing that. So there is a vibrant discussion going on. We're not making this one up, but this is one where other communities are ahead of us. So that's part of why I want to look at Region 10 and why we should bring in some of the Canadian and other experience as well. It's not to negate all the other balancing we do. It's just there's an awful lot of information that we haven't availed ourselves of in doing the work we do that we have ignored. So it's a question of getting the right information into that balance in the first place.
And so building upon
It's just
that,
more sophisticated than you might
yeah,
think,
well
which I
then
would understand.
building upon that, rather than, you know, maybe just individual meetings and briefings, perhaps, because, you know, certainly our calendar is not full enough, perhaps an informational workshop at some point so that we can all hear about what is, you know, being explored in other EPA regions or other areas.
Yeah, that's a great dialogue discussion, and we're learning some things too in the marine protection areas, right, Fran? Yeah, in terms of the application of the traditional ecological knowledge in the management of the marine resources. So it's a vibrant area, and those are good comments. Thanks.
He's Mr. Stormwater, you're Ms. Ocean. Great. Well, thank you all, and thank you all for taking the time, not just today, but through the course of the study. And we're not done yet, so we'll be spending a lot more time together, and we appreciate it. Terrific. All right, we will next move on to item 9, but in keeping with the kinder, gentler me, I'm not going to take a long break. 5 minutes. People need a bio break, check their emails, and then we'll be right back. I know I need to look at a couple things, but only 5 minutes, and then we'll start. Well, Janine, can you? Oh, I'm on. We'll start in just a couple of minutes. I think we can start. You all are here. We're here. Right. I'm sorry, we will do this report earlier in the agenda from now on. Not quite sure how this happened. All right, we're reconvening at 2:45.
Okay.
Yep, take it away, Max.
This is on, yes. Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Marcus, board members. I'm Max Gomberg, the climate change advisor to the board. With me this afternoon are Rafael Maestu from the Office of Research Planning and Performance, Carlos Mejia from the Council's office. I also want to make mention, behind us in the first row here is Mark Emerson from the Division of Drinking Water, and Eric Oppenheimer, who runs the Division of the Office of Research Planning and Performance. So we're here to report on the emergency conservation regulation that the board passed back in July, and specifically on the water production data that was provided to the board on August 15th. And before we get into that, I know that a lot of people have been asking, for this data, and why is it taking us so long to make it public, and we will be public, as of this presentation, and it'll be up on our website. And one of the reasons is that we really wanted to make sure that we got as much data as we could, and you'll see that we did get a really high response rate. And B, we wanted to work to make sure that the data was accurate. And and that was important. As of just last Friday.
Accuracy is a nice thing.
Yes.
We strive for that.
We do.
Yeah.
As of just last Friday, we sort of were alerted to the fact that a bunch of the data had been entered wrong, and that actually had a measurable impact on the statewide results. So, you know, as we go forward with this, each month we'll probably be able to get the data out more quickly, but that's why it took so long this time around. So this is just, you know, the brief background on the regulation. As I said, you know, the data was due on August 15th. The rest of the regulation is now fully in effect. The statewide prohibitions on use went into effect as soon as the Office of Administrative Law approved the regulation, and then the requirements for the smaller water suppliers went into effect 30 days after, so at the end of August. So it's all in effect. So what we asked for on August 15th was the potable water production for both June and July this year and last year, which is what we'll be comparing. And whether the water suppliers had invoked the stage of their water shortage contingency plan as required by the regulation, where there are mandatory outdoor restrictions. And then we had some additional information on enforcement, recycled water, and implementation. You know, just a quick note on enforcement. Many of the water suppliers have chosen not to issue fines as part of their enforcement activities, but some are hiring additional personnel to respond to water waste complaints, and they're working with customers to reduce use and fix broken irrigation systems and leaks and so on and so forth.
Did you get any interesting recycled water numbers? Because people had asked us to include that.
We did, and you know, I think what you can see is that there are a handful of districts that are really, they've got a lot of projects going on right now to extend their purple pipe systems for irrigation, and then you've got a separate set that are really working hard on the indirect potable system, so that's more groundwater recharge or augmenting surface reservoirs with recycled water. So it looks like it's heading in a good direction.
Good.
So we were asking for data from the retail water suppliers, that's the suppliers in the state that have over 3,000 service connections, or they serve more than 3,000 acre feet per year. That 415 figure may go down by a couple. There may be a couple that are actually under that 3,000 threshold, but that's rough. And you can see we got responses from a lot of them. There's still some that are outstanding, but the responses we got represent 33 out of the slightly over 34 million people who are served by this group of suppliers out of the 38 million total state's population. So that's 97% of who we're looking to have covered
And
are covered.
Highlights the difference in response to a regulation compared to the response to a voluntary request.
It most certainly does.
Yes.
And so we are working with the water suppliers whose data we don't have yet to make sure we get it in. And in many cases, it's been technical issues. You know, we're not aware of any cases where someone's refusing to provide the data. So I'm going to now turn it over to my colleague, Rafael, who's going to walk you through the results.
Great.
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, so we still have 53 water suppliers that we didn't receive information for the month of July. We expect the responses to increase for when we get the responses for the month of August. So what we're trying to do with the data is to answer specific questions that we were asking, that we are interested in knowing. For example, one of the questions we're asking is what percentage of the water suppliers are actually implementing mandatory outdoor restrictions. What we see is that 71% actually are implementing some kind of mandatory restrictions, and we know that of 2 of them that are actually taking alternative allocation rate-based plans, which also meet the requirements.
That's right.
So we expect this number to improve, but right now we are at 71%.
Just one question. When you say mandatory outdoor restrictions, that's both the prohibitions. Are you combining if they respond that they are taking action against the prohibitions, and they are identifying that they have identified a stage of water shortage contingency plan work? I mean, do they have to say both, or could they say, are both considered? Are you just assuming that they do both?
This question was aimed at the latter. So whether they had implemented that stage of their contingency plan where those mandatory restrictions kick in.
So this is for the large ones.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
Good question.
So in terms of water conservation, compared to the month of the last year, 2013, for June and July, we've seen an improvement. So we have, for the month of July, we have a 7.5% savings. That's approximately 17 billion gallons that were saved compared to what was used in last year. That is actually improvement from the month of June that we only saved 4.4%, which is approximately 9 billion gallons. So we are seeing an improvement, which is the right trend in the right direction. But this reduction of 7.5% average in July is not the same in every region. And this graph is showing you the percentage reduction by hydrology region. We group the water suppliers by hydrology region, and we see some differences. We can see that in the Sacramento River, for example, they're already almost at the 20%. They are 19.5% reduction. And other regions are way below that, like the South Coast, which is 1.7%. It's interesting to see in the graph the weight that the South Coast has on the state average. But the South Coast has 60% of the population, but they are only using 52% of the water. So in terms of per capita, they're probably at a lower rate than the other hydrology regions. So we can see that these efforts are not applied consistently. So we see significant differences in this percentage reduction.
It's interesting because you could look at this chart and guess what some of the reasons may be. The Sacramento area, you know, people saw Folsom at low levels and could see the pickle they were in. In some of the ones off on Colorado River, other areas that may have fairly good senior water rights, they don't perceive as much of a problem. And in South Coast, you have some of the community, I'm giving it the happiest face you can, that you have the areas that have been conserving for decades already. And so if you could superimpose this on when we will have the gallons per capita per person per day, it might tell a very different story.
That's right. The percent reduction from what?
From what?
You know, and that's that other piece of the puzzle. Percent that we can grade in some ways on that, but then there's another part to the grade, which is what was your starting point.
Correct. And as we collect more data in the next months, we will be able to analyze the information based on per capita. So the overall trend is positive. We went from 4.5% to 7.5%. We expect better results for the month of August.
And in May, we were at an average of?
We actually were using more by 1.5%.
Okay. That's
So
something.
we're going to talk about some of the standouts, although I want to caveat at the beginning of this that this is not an exhaustive list. There are really a lot of agencies and residents who have really stepped up and made conservation during this drought central to the way they live their lives and operate their businesses. But you know, we wanted to call out a few. So in Southern California, Long Beach, has had, you know, some of the most aggressive turf removal and other conservation programs for a long time, and they're starting at that lower baseline, and yet they've still managed, you know, July of this year compared to July of last year, to reduce consumption further by 4%. And so we think that's a really fantastic achievement. And the Golden State Water Company, their Claremont district, was one of the few in Southern California that achieved a double-digit reduction, at a 10% reduction. So that's noteworthy. In the Bay Area, the Alameda County Water District, and then the Tri-Valley communities, Dublin, San Ramon, Livermore, all had they're heavily dependent on the State Water Project, and they had their water cut early this year, and they've really responded tremendously with reductions of over 30% for most of them, July to July.
I think Board Member Diadamo reported that earlier today from Zone 7's the wholesaler for that area. So.
Yeah.
Right.
And then across the bay, Burlingame and Menlo Park have both posted reductions of over 20%. And, you know, some of the larger water suppliers in the Bay region also are up over 10%.
What's, remind me, I can look it up. What's San Francisco at? When you think about the major city that we know is only at around 50 gallons per capita per day, like a third of a lot of others.
They're at 9%.
And they reduced too, and they did 9%, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah. And then East Bay Mud is over 10%. I think they're at 12.
Great.
So, yeah,
Excellent.
it's been a good response. And the response in the valley has also been really impressive. You can see there are 9 different Sacramento region water suppliers that have July to July reductions of over 20%. In the San Joaquin Valley, there are also a number that have really posted high conservation percentages. So we're really, as has been said, beginning to see, I think, the trend of conservation go in the right direction, and people are responding to the call. Now, these 4 represent some of the larger utilities in the state that have had to respond to severe shortages. You know, basically into the rationing category because they've been in danger of running out of water. And they've all 4 of them have done a tremendous job. And, you know, we'll be looking to them should things continue to be dry, you know, into the winter, and we have more communities that are larger communities that are facing potentially severe shortages beyond what we've already been dealing with.
Great. A request on this, and I apologize if I was unclear before. In our conversations with the media when we did the regs, people were asking for who are the villains, who are the heroes, et cetera. And I appreciate you talking about it at this hearing, but what I'd really like is a paragraph for each of those that gets posted on our website. Because people want to know what's doable and what their neighbors are doing, and in that, if you can incorporate their gallons per capita per day, you need to vet it with them because it's premature formally. That's the kind of story I'm looking for, and looking for it to be more easily accessible than just the people who happen to be listening.
Chair
today.
Marcus, if I can just add to that, starting in October, we'll be getting the gallons per capita
We
per
are.
day information, but I think you'll hear a little later that there may be some opportunities for us to partner with Aqua as they start to detail the actions that many of these communities are taking. And part of what you'll see is that they're also posting updates of some of the communities that are taking much more aggressive action. And we can highlight many of those communities
That's
because
great.
they're the same ones that we're seeing in our data as well.
That's great. I just don't want to wait till October 15th.
Yeah.
I was happy to see that Dave brought an update on that, but I want us to highlight things because we told people we would do it, and we haven't done it. So I want it done.
Right. So we'll have a highlight for our October.
No, but I want it
presentation.
now.
Well,
I
we
wanted
can
it by
get the
today,
paragraphs up on the
So
on the
put the
website.
paragraphs up in the next day,
Okay.
please.
But in terms of per capita per day, it's going to be extremely important that we not compare San Francisco to Fresno.
No, right, no, we need to explain it.
Well, we need to be looking at the geographic area.
Right.
the-
It's more complex. I know that it's more complex,
Right.
but it doesn't
So-
mean we have to be silent on it. We can explain it.
Okay, we will have to be very clever in how we explain it, because if you just post it
I know.
as a list, it won't,
Correct.
it will be misinterpreted.
No, I'll tell you, I've asked for a story with caveats, et cetera. I was not at all clear. Now I'm trying to be clear.
And so actually, this slide sort of gets at that issue. The first bullet really, what we're explaining here is, we talked about Long Beach and how they've continued to make progress, and it's only a 4% reduction compared to 20+% elsewhere, but that's because they're starting at a much lower baseline,
Correct.
right? And
Correct.
when you've already reduced your outdoor irrigation frequency, when you've installed a more efficient irrigation system, when you've converted to drought